Now let's talk about projectile motion. Probably most of you played the game that is known as Angry Birds, where you pull the bird on the slingshot and it will go in a certain trajectory to hit certain objects, and you get points based on that. That is basically a projectile motion that's been analyzed through the software to be able to predict the trajectory of the bird. There is many physical parameters into this game to be able to make it look realistic or at least entertaining. In real life as well, you played many times in the ball, and you know when you hit the ball at a certain angle, either it's a football or it's a volleyball or whatever you're using, it goes in a certain curve. That curve is called projectile motion. When your ball or your object is going in a curve to land on the floor, that is called projectile motion in its simplest form. Now, the basics of projectile motion, the first guy who seriously thought about projectile motion is our genius Galileo, and he realized that many objects being thrown in a certain angle with a certain speed will go in a projectile motion, which is in a form of parabolic path for that projectile. As you can see here, there's a cannon over here throwing this ball. It's going in a trajectory and hitting the floor eventually. So trajectory is defined as the parabolic path of a projectile from the moment where it starts to move to the moment where it hits the ground. You can notice that projectile objects are starting with initial velocity. We call it VI, and this initial velocity, analyze and describe that as x direction component and a y direction component. In this case, initial velocity x and initial velocity y. Then there is a distance of the starting point of the object from the ground, which we call it delta y, and there is the range, like how far did the object go from the starting point, that what we call as delta dx, which is defined as the range. So the shape of the projectile trajectory depends a lot on its initial velocity and on the acceleration due to gravity. Like how fast did it start to move, in this case v initial, and of course we know that it will be decreasing in speed and going down to the floor due to the acceleration of gravity. That's what pulling it to go down to the floor all the time. Projectiles could go with objects that are horizontally launched or vertically launched or other special types of launch. Let's assume you have a coin that trying to play a game with your friend, a coin to roll it on the table, and the game or the coin will land on the floor at a certain target. In this case, while the coin is rolling horizontally, the vertical velocity is 0, of course. Now the projectile motion will start from the moment where the coin will leave the surface of the table and start to go free falling to the floor. It will follow a certain trajectory, and there's a certain height for that table which calls delta y, and there is a range. How far did it go from the moment it left the table? That is delta x. So we can here focus on the range. The range is the distance that the projectile travels horizontally over the level ground. If that's complicated to you, look at this table. You roll a coin, keep going in a straight line to the positive x-axis or to the right. The moment it left the table, it start to fall down to the floor. Then how far did it go in the trajectory on the x-axis from the moment it left the table, which is here, to the moment it hit the floor? That's delta x or delta dx in this case, which we call the range or the distance the projectile traveled horizontally. So you can throw an object from the floor, go up and go down and hit the floor again. From the moment you start to accelerate or to give a velocity to the object or he left the ground to the moment where it hit the ground again, that is called the range. And within this range, there is a point where it will be the maximum height that the projectile reach. As you know, due to the gravity, anything you throw it up should go down as long as it's not escaping the gravity of Earth. So when you throw a ball to your friend, it will go in the trajectory and it will hit the floor again. If you shoot the ball as hard as you can, it will not escape the atmosphere and it will not escape the gravity. It need way more force than that. So it will go in a directory and come back to you at a certain range, or how far it goes from the moment you shoot it to the moment it lands the ground. I focus again, initial vertical velocity is 0 while you're doing the horizontal motion over here, and it will start to be in a certain value as it is following the path or the trajectory to hit the floor. Because projectile has horizontal velocity component, it travels in a horizontal distance and along the ground from its initial launch point. Again, the distance is called projectile range. So what make the ball go from here to here? You give it horizontal velocity. The velocity is pulling the ball, or the coin in this case, to go further. It is going further to the right, but the gravity acceleration is pulling it downwards, so it will be losing its force until, or its speed until it hit the floor.